Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network Groong. I'm 𝐕𝐞𝐺𝐻. It's been more than 2 years since the dramatic popular protest of 2018 that resulted in the resignation of Serge Sargsyan and the subsequent election of Nikol Pashinyan as Prime Minister. The change in power, which is commonly referred to as the Velvet Revolution, gave many the hope of a more democratic Armenia. Many promises were made in 2018, and midway through this administration, many of us want to know how the Armenian government is delivering on those promises. In this conversation on Groong, we talked to two longtime activists who ended up on the opposite sides of the fence on this topic, with one becoming a member of parliament, while the other a fiery critic of the government. To help guide this conversation, we have 𝐕𝐞𝐥𝐻𝐿, who is a senior lecturer of political science and international relations at Bentley University in Massachusetts, where he teaches courses on the Middle East and the former Soviet space. This episode is part 1 of the discussion, covering the issues of democratization and corruption. In part 2, which we'll publish next week, we'll cover the topic of foreign policy. Before we begin, however, we appreciate your help in reaching a wider audience. So please hit the pause button and make sure to subscribe to us and like us on whatever platform you listen to us on, and help spread the word by sharing this podcast on your social media channels. Thanks in advance.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about the state of Armenian politics in general, two and a half years after what was known as the Velvet Revolution. So since mid-2018, Armenia's new government under the premiership of Nikol Pashinyan and the National Assembly under the supermajority control of My Step Alliance tried to propose and implement wide-ranging policy changes. While the ruling party has presented these changes as reforms, many critics of the regime have argued that those changes are attempts to undermine state institutions. 2020 has been specifically strenuous for implementing structural and policy changes, primarily because of the onslaught of COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of other factors such as the Davush fighting in July. Our guests today are both lifelong activists and two individuals who are not only intimately informed about socio-political processes in Armenia, but have played an active role in some of those changes. And I have to mention a disclaimer that I know both of them for over a decade, and I consider them as friends, regardless of what they consider me. So our first guest is 𝐷𝐼𝐴 Manucharyan, who is the president of the Civic Forum NGO. She holds a master's degree in educational management from Yerevan State University. Since 2004, she has been a civic and political activist and has worked with a number of local and international organizations. Her main area of focus include Nagorno Karabakh, Armenia's armed forces, national security, and foreign policy. Our second panelist is 𝐕𝐞𝐺𝐻𝐿, who is a member of the National Assembly of Armenia. He holds a PhD in history from Yerevan State University and has taught at the Yerevan State University of Linguistic and Social Sciences. His research focused on issues of nationalism, conflict, and democratization. Currently, 𝐺𝐻𝐿 is a member of the Standing Committee of Foreign Relations of the National Assembly of Armenia. Welcome, 𝐷𝐼𝐴, and welcome, 𝐕𝐞𝐺𝐻𝐿.
Hi.
Good evening.
Thank you. So I would like to start, 𝐷𝐼𝐴, with you. I just want to give some background. What led you? You were also one of the founders of the civil contract movement and later the party. What led you to get involved and create a civil contract? How long did your involvement in the civil contract last, and why did you eventually leave? Why did you part ways?
Oh, this is a tough one. Actually, it's probably the first time ever I'm going to talk about this in public in a way, and I've never spoken about it since I left the party.
There's a first for everything.
Yeah,
huh?
Exactly. Yeah, well, in 2013, I was approached by Nikol Pashinyan and was offered to actually create a political party, which will finally, in his words, would be the institutional opposition in this country, and will be able to create a viable alternative for that time ruling party, Republican Party. And as a prerequisite to that, he sent us and those people who he approached later on the document, which was called the contract, the actual civil contract, which included a number of points which I agreed upon. And of course, in my life, I reached a certain point where technically, after civic activism or certain political processes, there was a time for us to take some responsibility. So my individual goals, in a way, corresponded to the offer that was there. And also that he seemed very serious about it. He seemed very, let's say, a person who learned lessons from 2008, a person who actually is talking policy, not only activism. So it was convincing, quite convincing. So I joined in together with him and 7 other people to actually start initiating a process of creating a political party. So 2 years we worked together till 2015, and then in 2015 the party was formed. I was elected in the first board of the party. Then from that point on, things started to roll in a way, but it didn't roll quite the way I was expecting, to be honest. And eventually, in 2018, actually in 2017, I already made my mind, and the documentation, this resignation letter, was delivered right after New Year's in 2018. And the reasons were different. First of all, it did not turn out to be the party was not following the actual objectives that were there. We were not working on policy levels. Every discussion was ending with the final word of Nikol, and a lot of people were actually looking at what he will be saying rather than bringing in a political idea and an agenda or any sort of policy that was looking to the future of the country. And on the other hand, technically, we were back to the ground, square one in a way, that it was mostly the same good old Nikol that was not actually taking policy and politics the way he was promising, or at least he offered us to be looking at. So I'm a person who does not like to waste time, and I'm a person who actually is very pragmatic in that matter. And at some point, in 2016, actually, there was a little hope that we will be at least going to that direction that he promised, which was the formation of the shadow cabinet, him being the candidate. If you all remember, it was a little rally in the Opera Square, where he announced that he will be the candidate for prime minister. So we're like, oh, finally, we are actually getting into doing something. But then 2 months after that, he announced that Civil Contract will be forming a coalition with the 2 other parties to run for parliament. At that point, everybody forgot about the shadow cabinet, about anything, even about the party, because right after the elections, there was nothing happening in the party. So even during 2017, he himself said that, okay, the party is dead, kind of. So, and then at that point, you don't have anything else to do but to leave. So I was offered to run for the parliament back in 2017. I did not take the offer because I was seeing that things are not going the way I want them to go, or at least I was envisioning the ideas I had in mind, and nothing was left for me to do but to leave. So yeah, and I should actually emphasize this very hard, and I keep saying it. There is no regret, absolutely zero regret of me taking this decision, especially now, So
okay, we will come to those regrets and lack of regrets in a moment when we discuss about those issues. Okay. Thank you, Marine. Mikhail, sort of the same question for you. I've known you since 2000, 2001. We were colleagues. You were very much heavily involved in academia. You were also, I always envisioned you or looked at you as someone who's an activist, socio-political activist, as well as an academic. What made you decide in 2018 to get into politics so actively, rather than activism to politics itself? And I have to mention, it's not that there is a saying in English, sins of fathers. Mikhail's father was also an MP in the first elected parliament in Armenia at the independence, and has a long history of family who has been involved in politics in Armenia throughout the last century. Sorry, go ahead, Mikhail.
So yeah, that's a good question. I keep asking myself almost every day, why the hell did I do that? And every day I come up with new answers, and some of them are satisfactory and some of them are not. But I think it's always, these decisions, they don't involve just one factor. So there were a lot of factors involved, and one of them is peer pressure from my relatives, to sort of, I couldn't disappoint my parents and ancestors and so on. But to be more serious, I think that first of all, I don't think I've left academia for good. I sort of consider this, what I'm doing now, it's a mix between participant observation on one side and kind of, civil service for my country. It's not my aim to have a political career. I don't see myself as a politician in 10 years or 20 years. I don't think that this is what I have to do in life, because I think being a politician, it's a very ungrateful job, and it's very stressful, very tiring, and sometimes quite boring. So for me, being an academic is still more interesting. But I also couldn't refuse this offer, not in the sense that it was an offer I couldn't refuse, because it was an opportunity that if I had turned it down, I would always feel sorry about that, because this was a very exciting time, and it still is. And I was offered an opportunity to join a team which was doing something very interesting and exciting, and it's an opportunity to learn a lot. It's an opportunity to contribute to something really big that is happening right now, and it's also an opportunity to, in the future as an academic, if I ever and I will get back to these issues. I hope I will maybe be writing about this. And this is very useful, and it's also very useful for me as someone who has studied history, politics. It gives you an opportunity to understand these things from a completely different perspective. It's one thing to read about revolutions or reforms or all this other stuff.
So let's call it like a research project for you now, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one way to put it. Yeah, that's I think that's a good way to put it. But also I feel like I owe something, because and now I'm gonna get a little bit sentimental. I think the moment that the revolution happened was one of the happiest moments in my life, and the revolution in general was probably the brightest and the most interesting and the happiest experience I have had, excluding some very personal things that I probably won't mention here. But of the things that you can mention in a public conversation, I think the revolution was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me, and I felt like I owe something to my country, to my people, to the team that made the revolution, and I have to participate in the process of securing the gains of revolution. Because as a political analyst, as a historian, I know that the most difficult, the most dangerous period is usually after the revolution. The first 2-3 years after the revolution is usually when all the bad things happen. So in a way, if the revolution is the party, then comes the hangover usually. So if you look at the, there are many cases. So in some cases there has been a war, in a civil war or foreign intervention. In other cases there's been a economic collapse. In other cases there was a capture of power by radicals, dictatorship, etc. So my biggest goal is to contribute to not letting that happen. And I think so far our team has done not a bad job, but I think that's the topic of our conversation, so I'll stop here.
Yes, it is, Mikhail. And I just want to, it's interesting. On the one hand, Marine was a founding member or one of the founders of Civil Contract, but then eventually left. But you never joined Civil Contract, right? You ran as an independent in the My Step Alliance. Am I correct for that, Mikhail?
Yeah. It's My Step is an alliance, so there are independents, and I am independent. And that's part. That's exactly why I'm saying I don't see myself, as a politician for life. So that's one of the reasons I'm not a member of the party.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that introduction, I want to talk about our first issues. We're going to be covering 3 major issues, and I want to get your feedback and your thoughts about it. So the first one is the state of democracy in Armenia. For many international observers, as well as for the current ruling party, the 2018 mass demonstration and subsequent change of power was viewed as a big step toward democratization. Of course, there are a lot of challenges in terms of consolidation or not. So I would like to get your opinion briefly about how would you assess the state of democracy in Armenia today? Has there been any major advance in this sphere in the past 2.5 years or so? And I'd like to start with Marine about your thoughts.
You're giving me the tough ones, aren't you, all the time?
Well, Mikhail will have an option as well. Don't worry. We're equal opportunity question askers.
Just probably to prepare your auditorium in a way that I'm not going to be nice and being very, softening things. I'm going to say what I think. And that's probably one thing that I've been always doing. And I actually do not think that Armenia got more democratized, to be honest. I don't think that even if you look into the reports and everything coming from the foreign organizations as well, I don't think we had a very major step forward. In fact, I think when it comes to the civic consolidation and everything, things got shaken, but it did not improve. It actually, if anything, it got even worse, because I believe that when it comes to freedom of expression, things got worse. When it comes to the freedom of assembly, things got worse. And many other issues like this. And unfortunately, all this is packaged with a lot of hate that is being accumulated by the current government. And I think it's an inertia of the person who is running the country. It's like an old habit kind of thing. And the texts that are being generated are full of hate. And now, I mean, the counter argument might be that, but what about the previous government? What about them now behaving this way, that way? Honestly saying, I don't care, because I have a new government today, and all my demands are addressed to this new government. And when you look at the way the prime minister's page is being run, the way that every outspoken critic is being attacked on a personal level, on outside not physical so far, although physical cases were happening as well. But things are actually kind of ugly. Like, there is no feeling of security and safety, as we were kind of, we were in one camp hating the previous government, and people were very sweet and nice, were saying whatever they would want, had enough freedom of expression, and did not actually get prosecuted unless they did something in line with those persecutions. I mean, I don't want to go into individual cases as such, but the atmosphere in general was much, much more pleasant. Nowadays, I would not call it that way. And it's actually getting, in a way, worse and worse, given the economic situation getting bad. And also people are kind of waking up from this euphoria of the regime change. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to call it a revolution, because I have my own views on that as well. Of course, I'm happy that certain events made 𝐕𝐞𝐥𝐯𝐞 join the politics as well, because before he was very skeptical about it. So yeah, I don't think that we had actually, and even if you look at the Freedom House reports as well, the numbers didn't change significantly. They changed some methodology. They might have played with 0 point something here and there.
Right.
But in general, the picture didn't change. And to be honest, I am very skeptical about this reporting as well, because we all know how the reports are being done. Certain people are connected with certain groups, and there are peer pressure, and there is always the bias in some sense. And of course, when you reach a tipping point of a so-called revolution, then some numbers will probably shift 1 point or 2. But in general, the picture didn't change to a better picture in a way.
Looking at the issue from a broader picture as well, the same question, Mikhail, to you, in terms of how do you see the progress or regress, in terms of, we already heard Martin talking about a sort of a regress about the democratic consolidation in the country. What's your assessment, overall, general, broad picture assessment of democratization in Armenia?
Well, obviously I am biased, so, I'm a member of parliament from the ruling party, so whatever I say, maybe distorted picture. But I think that what happened in Armenia in 2018 was really a very significant change, because irrespective of what was written in the laws and what got into the reports, we had a sort of semi-feudal, semi-medieval system in which there were different sort of castes of people. So there were the oligarchs, there were the people from the government who could basically do everything, and the law did not really apply to them. Then there were sort of mid-level functionaries who were a little bit less influential, but they profited from the corruption. Then there were the rest of the people who were, to different degrees, really, deprived of their rights. I mean, of course, if you were like middle-class intellectual with good education and some opportunities, you had more opportunities. If you were somebody, without a lot of social capital, you could be just thrown away from your home, and your home could be destroyed, and some new building could have been built at your place, as happened many times. So I think what the revolution changed is enormous, and I think if you compare Armenia to the rest of the region, we are in a completely different group now. I mean, when I'm reading the news from some other post-Soviet countries, or not just post-Soviet countries, I have the feeling that we exist in different realities. In the past, I had the same feeling when I was reading news from Georgia, for example, or from Eastern Europe. I was thinking, really, these are the problems that these people have? And then looking at what was happening in our country, I was feeling depressed. And now, of course, there are a lot of problems, and not everything is great, and there are a lot of new challenges because this is a new situation. I mean, in general, for Armenian people, this is a new situation when people have to take responsibility for their future. This has been a new thing, and psychologically it can be quite difficult because in the past you had the regime, you had Serge Sargsyan, or before that was 𝐘𝐞 in the view of many people, before that was Petrosyan. So basically there was the government which came from nobody knows where. It did not answer to anyone. It was not taking into account any opinions. It did sometimes, but in general it was a thing in itself. Now the people have chosen their government and they had very high expectations, and obviously this government has not been able to fulfill all these expectations, and even if it was the best government in the world, the expectations were so high that it was simply impossible, and we are getting a lot of criticism, I would say, from right and from left. So we are getting sort of conservative criticism from the right. I think what Marine said is an example of that, saying that we are too radical, we are persecuting members of old government, we are spreading hate and so on. So that's one point of view. And then there's the other point of view, which I think is much more popular, and I feel all the time the pressure, when talking to people on social networks, we are being accused of not doing enough to punish the old government. We are being accused of not being radical enough. We are all the time being accused that, people who run the country for the last 20 years are still not in jail, that 𝐾𝐞, for example, is not in jail, 𝐬𝐷𝐞 is not in jail, and so on. So all these people who were really and are widely hated by the majority of the Armenian society and who are considered to be the main culprits, they are still, they are able to function, they are able to talk to the media, they actually own a large part of the media landscape, and we get a lot of criticism for that. Some people blame us for, having some kind of conspiracy with them. So that's my favorite conspiracy theory, that Nikol was a project of Serge. Others are blaming us for being too weak, and so on. So I think this is normal, and this happens always when you are being criticized from both sides. And I think that means that probably so far we have been able to do something right. I mean, if both sides are unhappy, it means that probably we're doing so. Of course, in many issues I agree with some of the criticism, but I think given the resources of the country and given our past, I don't think we've done a very bad job. And then, of course, there's the coronavirus, which has really, we have been really unlucky with that. But also, again, I mean, I'm trying to imagine what would have happened if...
That's a force majeure.
Yeah, but still, I think again, Armenia was very lucky that this coronavirus situation happened after the revolution and not before that, or that there is a different government in place, a government which has been actually elected by the people rather than being formed as a result of electoral violations, because I'm sure the situation would have been much worse, as the case is in many other countries. I mean, still, it's not the greatest situation in Armenia, but we have been able to withstand this crisis more or less.
Right. Something that Marina mentioned earlier, I want to do a follow-up first to you, Mikhail, and then to Marina as well, is that since early 2019, the Armenia's media, social, and news landscape has exploded with increased activism, quote unquote, both criticizing as well as praising the current government. As someone who follows Armenia's media landscape, social and print, we didn't see as much of activism under the previous regime, but now we see it's almost explosion on this issue. How do you explain the surge in political polarization in the media?
Well, I think it's first of all, I don't think it's there is a surge. I think it has been always there, and the difference is that under the previous regime, there was the majority of the media was somehow controlled by the former government, and there were stop lists and so on. So, for example, I was, as a political analyst, even though I was not a member of any opposition party, I was invited to some media, but I was never invited to others. So there was a stop list, which were basically, part of the management of the media landscape. So even a lot of the opposition, so-called opposition media, was still owned by people close to the former government. So there was this kind of management thing. Now, after the revolution, this is gone. So basically what is happening is, everyone who has an opportunity to say something, they do say something. And a lot of money is being put into the media because the people who used to be in the government, they still have the money, they still have influence, they still have media outlets. They can hire a lot of technology, political technologists, media specialists, etc. And then I think what has changed in Armenia, everyone has become much more politicized. So before the revolution, there was a large part of the population which thought, okay, nothing will ever change. The government has been the same for the last 20 years, and it will be the same for around 20 years. Let's just hope that we will get a green card and move to US or to Russia or whatever. Now, a lot of these people, because of the revolution, they have become politicized. So most of them took part in the revolution. There were some who, did not agree with the revolution. So all these people have suddenly become politicized. And as a member of parliament, I have to tell you that this is horrible. Because I'm trying to keep my lifestyle the way it was. I don't have we actually cut the number of service cars that the National Assembly has. So I'm taking I don't have my own car, so I'm taking a taxi all the time. So every day I basically do a small sociological survey, and thanks to the coronavirus now, and sometimes I don't have to talk to the taxi drivers because I can sit behind and I have a mask and not all of them recognize me. But in general, I can tell you that in my experience is that everyone is really politicized. Everyone has very strong opinion about everything. And part of it is, what Marina mentioned when she was talking about hate. I don't agree that this is somehow generated by us or by Pashinyan. I think this is part of all these repressed feelings that existed before the revolution. They're coming out, and I feel the same hate, or maybe even more hate, because I feel it from two sides. So we just I think it's part of becoming a free society. It's just we are still not used to be in a free society.
It makes sense that it takes two to tango, but Marine, to paraphrase sort of what Mikhail mentioned in terms of the media under the previous regime was larger, or has larger capability, and the fact that now they turned into opposition, that's why you see a larger surge of anti-government sort of sentiments in social and print media. But that put aside, what's your take on the increase? Do you feel that there is a surge? You did mention that there is a government. You blame the government for this sort of hatred or sort of vile speech and so on and so forth. But do you feel that there's also an increase or a surge in the number of anti-government sort of media outlets as well as activism in Armenia?
Can I just go back a couple of points before this? I want to make this timeline in a way for us to understand what we're talking about, because Mika is very nice and he's going into this personal feelings and how he feels and everything. But I'm sorry, but I don't think that just for these feelings, it was worth to put country into a turbulency that we have now. I mean, I don't say that it was inevitable. Whatever happened, happened. But then after what came, that's what is shaking the country up until this moment. And this is what I care about. I don't care about whether the cab drivers are nice or nice, whether in the streets I get, hatred or not. This is not an issue that I would really put in the middle of the picture. And I'm sorry to say, but politicization of the society is also it's a process that started long before all this started. So it was like probably, let's say, 2007 or 2008. The entire vocabulary that was used during this so-called revolution, it was actually being generated, and then social media joined in, and then this entire hatred and also the language, the lexicon, everything was generated. And I was part of it. Mm-hmm. I know it, and I can actually acknowledge it. And this is why I also have changed many of my stances, looking back and reflecting upon the way I passed myself. Also, I wanted to mention that it's not just that the silent majority finally woke up and decided that, oh, there is a chance to change. No, I'm sorry, but let's be pragmatic. This entire endeavor that happened in 2018, it was not like one action, a man who started walking from Gyumri and bringing change to Armenia. It was a big puzzle of different groups of interest gaining their momentums, jumping on the wave that was being created, including all these very hated oligarchs and everything. So at a certain point, the same Pashinyan did not refuse any of these offers, and he did actually come to power on the shoulders of every single political camp that is seen in the Armenian map of the politics in a way. So I don't think that it's fair for us at least, for people who have seen the political situations from in and outside, to actually be this kind of idealistic and this kind of emotional about how people actually got to the streets and start doing and bringing change. The same about elections. I'm sorry, 𝐕𝐞𝐥𝐯𝐞, but I have been talking also to the people from the civil contract, the guys who were very frustrated about election violations happening even among the groups. Yes, the wave was big. People were still going to vote for my step whatsoever. But there were violations down there as well. So let's not say that it was absolutely clear, pure, beautiful process and, the best and whatever bastion of democracy of Armenia as we created the elections happened first time in its history. No, that's a lie. Let's not at least lie to ourselves. And on the other hand, I also would like to say that actually the previous governments also fought pandemics. So not at this scale, of course, but also this pandemic, that's probably another issue for another subject to actually touch upon, because it has started, apparently they did hide that it started not in March, but in actually February. The same officials made the same 2 times this mentioned February by mistake and were corrected by the Prime Minister. So let's not go in there as well, and not forget that it was also done during the campaign of the constitutional change, and the government actually neglected all the shouting from the opposition, even the ones that were from the previous government, shouting that you need to shut down the country now and not campaign in Sunik. So the entire process was very populistic, and we do have to admit that it is a populistic government in the office now. So just to say, because this was like piling up as such during the conversation. Regarding the activist groups, as you said, like they've been seen as many of them in the streets. I would say that quality-wise, it's not a good quality activism as we've seen. But on the other hand, these are not very well-trained activists as well. So it is a bit of a process that we need to still understand who is who and what is what. And whatever is against government is immediately labeled as paid and as orchestrated by the previous government. And whatever is for the government, then, oh, yes, we understand, but we can't, our hands are tied. So I do think that there is still some time has to pass for us to, in fact, see, to clear out the field in a way. But when it comes to the life getting better, I have to make a couple of remarks here as well. As a citizen, just literally living in this country. So just living in the country, maybe this sort of, for those who were in the streets for many years and, going home frustrated during elections, being beaten by the police brutality and all sorts of things, maybe for them was a relief, finally things changed on our way. But when you look at the citizen-state relationship, things gotten worse in all the spheres of the government. The road police is in a terrible condition. The city municipality, the Yerevan looks like I don't know what. I'm sorry, but if we were making fun of the Taron being pedant and not, planting little tiny flowers and wasting money, being corrupt whatsoever, but city looked neat. Now you walk in Yerevan, I don't know what it is. I don't know. Maybe the people that finally discovered during revolution what city center is, or the capital of the country is, remaining in the country, not going back to their homes. Something in there maybe, but things had changed to worse. And I'm talking to a lot of people, those who are afraid to speak out loud, those who are from current government, those who are from current civil society, ex-civil society, I don't know, across the sector. I have no problems talking with people, although I'm being blamed like, in many, many, many ways, also including the current government as well. So, yeah, this is, I think it's a bit, arrogant in a way from the ex or like the former civil society part of which is now government to look at the people in the streets and saying that, oh, you're paid by the previous regime. If you go into the group by group, there are really situations that need to be addressed and they're not being addressed and people are getting frustrated. And also to say the least, if not go too far with your question, I think in the core of all this, the problem is that civil contract never had, and up until this point, does not have a vision of Armenia. Even the Prime Minister's 2015 long presentation about it and everything changes from year to year. Last year, he was he was increasing our GDP for 15 times. During the 2015 presentation 2 days ago, he was talking about 20 times increasing this GDP. I mean, he just throws things out there. And then it makes a headline and then he forgets about it. And the entire team is actually functioning that way. I'm sorry, but this country does not have that resources to continue being so unserious about things. There is war coming and it is coming. I mean, you can keep repeating about these things, that it's not coming, that it's the paranoia of the former government people and me apparently, according to some, serving to that interest as such.
Marine, I think what you're mentioning probably, as you mentioned earlier as well, what you're talking about are general or specific issues. And, there are perspectives and also the neighbors or the people you talk with. There is no uniform, homogeneous mentality or thoughts about these things. But it's good to hear about these issues from different perspective as well. Now, one of the key issues, and Mikhail mentioned this earlier as well, that there were a lot of high expectations from the current government. And he also mentioned that there are shortcomings, or there are some issues that the government hasn't been able to deal with. I want to turn into the issue of corruption now, because that was one of the major pillars of the new government's agenda, and to fight corruption. 2 years later, we still don't have any significant court verdicts or prominent corruption cases in Armenia. Now, my question in general, as an assessment, I will ask the question first to Mikhail and then to Marine. If you were to assess the issue of corruption in Armenia, both systemic, also everyday life. Marine also mentioned a bit about that. But systemic corruption in terms of having, fighting state-sponsored corruption or the marriage between economy, oligarchs, and so on, and government. That's the systemic one. And everyday corruption, such as police, school, university. Have there been any major changes? Or are there actually discussions about these things within the government circle, within the parliament, considering that Armenia is a parliamentary system now? And that's the first part. And the second part, what are they? How do you assess that, Mikhail?
So, thank you for this question. I think it is very important to understand that corruption in the previous system was not some kind of shortcoming. It was the glue that kept it together. So basically, even if you look at the salaries of state officials, which some of them are still in place, you understand that in the previous system, nobody was expected to live, thanks to their salary. Corruption was a major part of the system. It was the glue that put it together. And there was a risk that when this glue was removed, the whole system would fall apart. And we still have a lot of problems because of that, because some of them were solved very quickly. Marina mentioned the Yerevan City municipality. So, for example, when after the previous government left and Staron Markaryan had resigned, there was a crisis in terms of garbage collection. So for several months, basically nobody collected garbage because the previous company, which had received this contract through corruption, basically sabotaged it, and in the end they just refused to do it. And there was a lot of criticism that this new government is even unable to collect the garbage. And today no one talks about it because simply this was returned to the city. So now it's basically state-run, or rather the city-run service, and the garbage is collected, and I haven't heard any complaints about garbage for the last year. Another issue is the roads. Again, for 20 years, the roads in Armenia were horrible. And we heard all kinds of explanations why it's impossible to build good roads, why it's very difficult, why, maybe next year and so on. Now, in just 1 year, there's been 2 years actually, there's been an amazing progress in terms of building new roads, connecting not just cities but also smaller villages, etc., etc. Simply because the corruption disappeared. There is, here I have to agree that there is no some kind of miracle strategy that allowed this to happen. It's simply because the corruption has been removed, and because the corruption has been removed, the efficiency has increased. There's new financial resources that are used, and so on. But of course, this doesn't mean that there are no issues to be resolved. And again, we have inherited a country which was basically on the brink of collapse. So basically, none of the state system was functioning properly. Again, going back to the coronavirus situation, we had a healthcare system which was basically in ruins. I mean, the same is in education, the same is everywhere. You go to schools, you go to hospitals, they are basically in ruins, and this is being solved, this is being, these issues are being solved, but it takes time, obviously. And so what was the second part of the question?
The second part, well, you sort of combined both of them. The second part was basically also asking, are there any actions taken or deliberated in the parliament and the National Assembly about these issues? Because when we talk about corruption, why haven't there been criminal charges or corruption charges brought against Sanitec, the company that was about this? There were some let's call it show trials, major trials, but then it ended up being sort of marginalized. And that is one of the things that a lot of people would criticize, saying that you guys came to power with the promise of cleaning up and so on and so forth. But other than those major show trials, we don't see a continuity. And those changes that you're saying could be, I'm not saying that it is, could be an attempt by the government to say, well, look, we cleaned up the roads, we did this, so we are different from others. But actually holding people accountable, as you put it, we don't see that.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Yeah, and the problem is that there are a lot of investigations, there are a lot of criminal cases, but there are very few court verdicts. And partly this is because this takes time, and also, as I'm sure that our friends in the US know, if you're rich and influential, you can hire the best lawyers, and your court proceeding can take for years, as we are seeing in case of Kocharian, 𝐸𝐸𝐾𝐴N, and all these other people. So people from the former government, they have a lot of money and they can afford the best lawyers. And I think the people who are absolutely the happiest about the revolution, these are the lawyers in Armenia. I think they have earned more money in these 2 years than they had earned in the previous 20. So that's really good, at least as one group that has no reason to be unhappy about revolution. And of course, this takes time, but also part of the problem is that the court system is still, it's pretty much the system we have inherited from the old regime. And here is the main point of criticism against our government, and also the main point of disagreements within our team, because there are a lot of people in the society that believe that we have to be more radical, we have to be maybe employ some kind of form of transitional justice, which would simply clean away all these people who came from the former government. And but we believe in a more gradual approach. We believe that it is better to let go somebody who's guilty than to punish somebody who's not guilty, or to create a precedent for the future. Because I think in some cases, in post-Soviet countries also, I don't want to mention specific countries, but in some cases, this justice has been used, and a lot of corruption, people guilty of corruption have been punished, but then this justice system started working not exactly the way it should be working in democratic society. So far, the consensus in our team is that it's better to move more slowly, even though we understand that a lot of people are unhappy. And one last point is that among the criminal cases and investigations which are ongoing in the moment, there are ones that are targeting members of our own team. So basically, even people from our team who, if there is a reason to believe that they have been involved in criminal actions, there's absolutely no immunity for them. They will be tried and investigated just like the rest of them. And I understand that for a country like US, this sounds like, okay, what's there to brag about? But I think for most people in the post-Soviet country, this is a sign that there has been a really significant change.
Okay, thank you. Marine, in the words of Mikhail, he mentioned that there is no magic wand, something that Prime Minister Pashinyan has mentioned in his speech. But it's an admission that yes, there is no magic wand to change these, and that changes will have gradually evolutionary rather than revolutionary. I want to focus on the second part of the question that I asked to Mikhail, and I want to take your opinion, get your opinion about: have you seen that there are changes in non-systemic corruption aspect in terms of everyday life when you go around, in terms of teachers, in terms of students, in terms of universities, or any everyday life? You did mention negatively about the police, the traffic police, and so on, but do you feel that there is any change or there is an accountability that you didn't see 2.5 years ago?
Asbadjan, I am about to be 38-year-old woman. In my entire life, I've never paid a single bribe, just for you to know. And I lived most of it in the times of the previous government. So, but on the other hand, we do talk about a lot of people around us, families, friends, colleagues here and there. And when it comes to the the basic bribery things, yes, this element probably is gone. But I would not say it's because law enforcement is there, or it's because law and order, or it's this and that. It's because simple fear that people will be knocking on each other, as they say in the Soviet Union, like they will report about you taking this bribe here and there. So it doesn't mean that whether in a year or two, when the economic situation gets very bad, the government starts having much more opposition, bigger and louder voices out there, people will care or will continue actually reporting to the government about such cases. And so these little corruption cases will be back in our everyday life, because that is how this society is in a way function. And if there is no fundamental change in the force, this will not change. I mean, the problem is that, again, Mikhail is speaking a bit very, I have a feeling that I'm listing the opposition newspaper headlines in a way, like statements that are very emotional. I'm sorry, Mikajan, but these are like texts that I've been reading for 20 years, and they are the same. That, they were bad, we are very good. No, it's not that. We have to accept the fact that it is us. It's all us. It's this society that is generating everything, from good to bad. And if we're not able and capable of doing anything to change it, then we're going to be in the loop all the time, over and over again. Just as an example to bring you were saying oligarchs are gone. Yes, if you call them businessmen now, they're not oligarchs. It doesn't mean that they're gone, and it doesn't mean that their actions are gone. If you're saying that, they are able to hire very good lawyers, and that's why the cases are being dragged. Oh, Samvel Alexanyan is certainly a saint now. He does not have anything to do with law enforcement. He has no problem whatsoever. No, the thing is that the current government is actually improvising as it goes. So they technically make cut deals with those who they're capable of cutting deals with. They don't cut deals with those who don't cut deals, and then those who don't cut deals, they go to jail for a certain time, and then voila, at some point they're either disappear from country or accidentally leave the country or stay in jail or have health issues for that to leave the country. I mean, it's a very tiny country. If you go around, you literally can discover everything you want to discover in that matter. And when it comes to the, this perception, or at least the image that you're drawing about the current team members, or none of them are saying, I can literally point out those who are around Nikol Pashinyan and are there for just warm up their hands for corruption. This is something that people when you know them in person, and you know them through the process, and you've seen them in action. And I would not literally look for any saints in the Armenian government, in the Armenian civil society, nowhere. So this is like something to have in mind. Regarding the municipality solving the issue of the trash as such, if in the times of Serge Sargsyan government, we would learn that the municipality bought from one buyer over one night this many cars without any procurement tenders announced whatsoever, that would be a huge deal. But today we have cars in the streets which are actually not the ones that were supposed to be. These are very loud КамАЗ, and they actually run on wrong motors. This I have checked with people who've been working in the field as well. Although those who were responsible for the trash collection were still arguing with me, but they're wrong. These are like cars that are not suited for the small cities to run around and collect trash. Simply that, and they are both from one buyer overnight. So if it is not a corruption risk there, and actually municipalities very famous about buying stuff from one person, from organizations that are registered 2 days ago, and giving them money for different events, including, friends and family members of government members. So let's not say that the corruption is gone from this country.
Right. Well, I think no one would agree. Even Mikhail mentioned that corruption is not gone. I think from his approach,
it's not even on its way. On
right.
the way out.
I think it's fascinating to see these issues from different perspectives, and I would consider both of you as starting from the same point, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, more or less, and how, you diverted based on your life choices, but also based on the environment you're in. You cannot expect anyone to be aware of all aspects of society or interact with all segments of society, and hence your perspective. This is why these conversations are helpful, to see perspectives from different sides. I wouldn't call it opposite sides. It's not left or right issue. It's rather an issue of looking at things from your own prism. And with that, I want to end this segment of our conversation with 𝐘𝐞𝐫𝐬 𝐬𝐷 and Marina Manouchiarian on the issue of democratization in Armenia, as well as the issue of corruption. Thank you both for joining us today on that. We are going to have you again on the issue to have a conversation about the foreign policy challenges of Armenia since 2018.
That concludes part 1 of this conversation on Groong on the state of Armenia's power transition. As a reminder, please be on the lookout for part 2 of this conversation next week, where we talk about Armenia's foreign policy since 2018. We hope this conversation has helped your understanding of the issues involved and look forward to your feedback and suggestions. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's GROONG, or on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm 𝐕𝐞𝐥𝐯𝐞 𝐌𝐚𝐬, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you and talk to you soon.